From space, Florida looks simple, a long green peninsula, surrounded by ocean, slowly dissolving into swamps and mangroves. Most people assume this landscape is mostly natural, untouched, wild, but hidden underneath the forests and wetlands of South Florida are the remains of an ancient engineered world. A kingdom built not from stone, but from shells, canals, and entire islands constructed by human hands. And we only discovered how massive it really was after we started scanning the ground with lasers. Long before Miami condos, before Disney, before anyone thought Florida was a good idea, Southwest Florida was ruled by a powerful civilization called the Calusa. Their kingdom stretched from the Florida Keys to Tampa Bay when Europeans first arrived in the 1500s. Spanish explorers described a central capital, massive ceremonial structures, and a ruler who governed thousands of people. Which is strange, because the Calusa weren't farmers. They didn't build stone pyramids. They didn't even grow crops. Instead, they built their entire society on something much more Florida appropriate: fish. The Calusa were master fishermen who controlled the estuaries, canals, and waterways of the Gulf Coast. Their capital, known today as Mound Key Archaeological State Park, was actually an artificial island built from layers of shell, bone, and sediment rising more than 30 feet above the water. In other words, the Calusa didn't just live in the landscape, they engineered it. And for centuries, archaeologists assumed these shell mounds were basically prehistoric garbage piles, which is honestly kind of insulting, because when scientists started scanning them with modern technology, they realized something incredible. These weren't trash heaps, they were cities. LIDAR stands for light detection and ranging. It's basically a system where aircraft fire millions of laser pulses at the ground and measure the reflections. Trees get filtered out, vegetation disappears, and suddenly, you can see the shape of the land underneath, which is how archaeologists realized something shocking about the Calusa capital. Under the mangroves and jungle, there was a planned city layout. At the center of it all is Mound Key, a 125-acre island built almost entirely by human hands over the last 2,000 years. The LIDAR scans show massive shell mounds, engineered platforms, canals running through the settlement, and enormous enclosed water basins. One canal alone runs nearly 2,000 feet long and about 100 feet wide, basically a marine highway through the middle of the island. But the strangest structures are something archaeologists call water courts. These are huge engineered enclosures built directly into the estuary. Some of them are over 36,000 square feet in size. And they weren't just decorative, they were fish storage systems. The Calusa would drive schools of fish into the courts and close them off with gates or nets, essentially creating a live seafood pantry, which meant they could store huge quantities of fish for later. That surplus likely fed thousands of workers who built the massive structures on the island. At the top of the largest mound, Spanish explorers recorded a huge structure belonging to the Calusa ruler, a building so large it could hold around 2,000 people. Archaeologists have even located the post holes of the king's house where Spanish officials once met the Calusa ruler in 1566, and suddenly the picture changes. This wasn't a loose collection of fishing villages, this was something closer to a maritime kingdom. A society that engineered islands, managed fisheries, and controlled the waterways of South Florida. All built with shells. Lots and lots of shells. The problem with studying places like this is simple. Florida grows things, fast. Mangroves, palms, vines, swamp vegetation. Give it about 10 minutes and nature will hide anything you built. For decades, archaeologists could only study small pieces of the Calusa landscape. But LIDAR changed the game. By stripping away vegetation digitally, researchers can map entire ancient settlements hidden under forests. The result? Features that were invisible on the ground suddenly appear clearly. Causeways, connecting mounds, artificial terraces, transportation canals, even subtle patterns in elevation that reveal where buildings once stood. And when scientists started mapping more of Southwest Florida, they realized something unsettling. Mound Key wasn't unique. There are dozens of engineered shell complexes across the region, entire coastlines modified by the Calusa over centuries. In modern terms, they were basically terraforming Florida. And Mound Key might not even be the strangest thing the Calusa built, because once archaeologists started mapping the coastline more carefully, they realized the Calusa landscape was full of mysteries. Some of them still don't have clear explanations. The Pine Island Canal Network. Just north of Mound Key sits Pine Island, home to another massive Calusa settlement called Pineland Archaeological District. And here, the Calusa did something even more ambitious. They dug canals, lots of them. Some run straight through the island for miles, connecting bays, estuaries, and inland waterways. These weren't just small ditches for canoes. Some canals are over 30 feet wide, which means large canoes could move straight across the island instead of navigating the dangerous open gulf. In other words, the Calusa may have built something like a prehistoric shipping network across southwest Florida, and Lidar surveys are still revealing more of these canals hidden under vegetation, which raises a weird possibility. We may only be seeing a fraction of the infrastructure they built. Then there's one of the strangest archaeological discoveries ever made in Florida. In the 1890s, excavations on Key Marco uncovered an incredible collection of preserved artifacts from the Calusa world. Wooden carvings, masks, figurines, and ceremonial objects unlike anything found elsewhere in North America. The most famous of these is the Key Marco cat. It's a small wooden statue of a human-like figure with feline features, carved with striking realism, and no one is completely sure what it represented. A spirit, a deity, a ritual costume, whatever its purpose, it suggests the Calusa had a complex spiritual world that archaeologists still only partly understand. And most of those wooden objects survived purely by accident, because they were preserved in waterlogged mud, which means entire parts of their culture may have simply rotted away without leaving evidence. The final mystery might be the biggest one. When you look at southwest Florida from the air, you start noticing something odd. Many of the islands along the coast aren't completely natural. They're built from shell deposits tens of feet deep. In some places, these shell mounds stretch for hundreds of acres, layer after layer of oyster shell, clam shell, and fish bone, accumulated over centuries. But in many cases, the shapes look intentional, terraced, leveled, engineered, almost like someone was reshaping the coastline itself, which means the Calusa weren't just adapting to their environment, they may have been actively redesigning it, building islands, canals, and fisheries that turned the estuaries of Florida into the foundation of an entire kingdom. And yet, despite all of that engineering, despite controlling thousands of people and hundreds of miles of coastline, the Calusa civilization vanished within a few generations. If this civilization was so large, so organized, and so powerful, where did the Calusa go? Then the Spanish arrived, and the Calusa did something very unusual for the 1500s. They fought back. In fact, a Calusa warrior famously mortally wounded explorer, Juan Ponce de León. During an early encounter in Florida, missionaries were expelled, colonial forts were attacked, and for a long time the Calusa managed to maintain their independence. But eventually the things that destroyed many indigenous civilizations arrived anyway. Disease, slave raids, and displacement. By the early 1700s, the Calusa kingdom had collapsed. Survivors fled south and merged with other tribes or relocated to Cuba with the Spanish. Their cities were abandoned, the canals filled with sediment, mangroves reclaimed the islands, and for centuries, most people forgot they were ever there, until aircraft began firing lasers into the jungle, and the ground started telling its story again. If you enjoyed this episode of Oddity Atlas, like, subscribe, and share with friends. It really helps us grow and get better and better at this. You might also like our playlist on hidden civilizations and lost cities of North America, because sometimes the strangest places in history aren't buried in distant jungles. They're hiding under the mangroves of Florida. And if you ever find yourself kayaking near Mound Key, remember, you might be paddling over the remains of a kingdom, ancient and more advanced than history ever told us. Ask yourself, what else will be found? Also, try not to think about how many ancient cities are probably hiding under the Everglades, because honestly, Florida is weird enough already.